There's a strange paradox about human connection. We think the way to be valued is to always be there, always answering messages, always picking up the phone, always available. But the truth is, the more you give away your time and your presence without limit, the less people notice it, the less they respect it. And the moment you step back, even slightly, suddenly the air changes. People turn. They notice the absence. They feel the shift. This is not just some social trick. It's a deep psychological principle. Carl Jung hinted at it in his reflections on individuation, where the process of becoming whole often meant withdrawing from the crowd, withdrawing from the roles people expect you to play. Because when you are endlessly available, you dissolve into the background. But when you withdraw, you reappear in the foreground of other people's awareness. Think about the relationships you've had. The friend who always said yes when you called. The partner who was always ready to give, no matter how much you took. The colleague who always volunteered for extra work. At first it feels good to have them around. But slowly, almost invisibly, the respect begins to fade. The gratitude weakens. And the presence that was once a gift becomes an expectation. Then one day when they stop showing up, you suddenly feel it. You remember what they meant. You realize what you lost. And here's the question that should haunt us. Why does it take absence for people to appreciate presence? This is where Jung's shadow creeps in. Human beings don't just respond to light to what's there. We are equally, sometimes more, shaped by darkness, by what's missing. We don't notice the air until it's gone from our lungs. We don't notice someone's effort until it stops arriving. And we don't value a person's presence until they withdraw. But this isn't just about teaching others a lesson. It's about survival of the soul. Jung once wrote that loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that matter most. And sometimes the reason we can't communicate them is because we've been too available, too close, too entangled in what others expect us to be. So stepping back is not just about changing how others see you. It's about changing how you see yourself. Imagine this. A man in his 30s who always says yes at work. He answers emails at midnight, takes calls during dinner, covers shifts, handles crises, does it all. He thinks this will make him indispensable. But instead, his boss stops noticing his sacrifice. His coworkers stop appreciating his effort. And slowly, he realizes he has erased the line between his own life and everyone else's demands. Then, one day, he says no. He doesn't answer the late-night message. He doesn't rush to fix the crisis. And suddenly, people scramble. They notice what he used to carry. They realize how much weight he bore. His absence became his teacher. Now, this doesn't mean withdrawal is about manipulation. It's not about playing games or trying to control people. It's about reclaiming the balance of power between your giving and the world's taking. Because here's the brutal truth. If you don't step back, no one will give you space. If you don't create absence, people will assume your presence is infinite. And if you don't withhold, others will consume until there is nothing left of you but resentment. Jung believed the psyche works through tension, through the pull between opposites. Too much presence leads to invisibility. Too much absence leads to disconnection. The art is to know when to withdraw so that your presence regains its weight. Have you ever noticed that silence makes words louder? That a pause in music makes the next note strike harder? That a period of solitude makes human touch burn deeper? The same law applies to relationships. Space creates gravity. Distance creates value. And stepping back is often the only way to let others step forward. But let's push deeper. Why is this so hard to practice? Why do so many people resist the art of withdrawal? Because deep down, many of us are terrified of being forgotten. We fear that if we don't constantly show up, people will move on. If we don't keep giving, they'll stop caring. This fear is ancient. It's rooted in the child who worries that if they don't please the parent, love will be withdrawn. It's rooted in the teenager who thinks if they don't adapt to the group, they'll be cast out. It's rooted in all of us because we know the pain of being invisible, and we equate presence with survival. But survival is not the same as respect, and constant availability does not build love. It builds dependency. It builds expectation. And worst of all, it builds invisibility. You see, when you always run to fix someone's problem, you train them to believe you have no problems of your own. When you always say yes, you train them to stop noticing what it costs you. And when you always show up, you train them to stop valuing your presence. So the paradox stands. To be remembered, sometimes you must disappear. Jung's concept of individuation was all about this, the process of separating yourself from the roles, masks, and identities that society, family, and even you yourself have created. He argued that true wholeness only comes when you're willing to stand apart, to withdraw from the collective, to let others be disappointed, to endure the loneliness that comes from stepping back. But what's fascinating is this. The moment you do it, the game changes. That friend who took you for granted suddenly checks in, wondering why you're distant. That partner who barely noticed your effort suddenly feels the gap. That workplace that consumed you suddenly realizes the hole your absence leaves. Because absence is not emptiness. It is presence in another form. It is presence with weight. This is why some of the most powerful people in history understood the art of withdrawal. Leaders who disappeared for months to reflect. Thinkers who retreated from the crowd to write. Artists who vanished to protect their creative fire. Their withdrawal was not weakness. It was the very source of their strength. And so, the practical lesson emerges. Stepping back is not about loss. It's about leverage. It's about giving your presence the weight that only absence can teach. So here's the question to sit with. Where in your life are you too available? Who no longer values you because you never step back? And what would happen if just for a while you withdrew your presence not to punish, not to manipulate, but to remember your own value? Because the truth is simple. When you step back, others step forward. And when you disappear, you finally appear. Most people hear this principle and immediately nod their heads. They say, yes, that makes sense. I should step back more. But then life happens. The phone rings. A message comes in. A request arrives. And without thinking, they say yes again. It's not because they didn't understand the principle. It's because they didn't understand the fear behind their own availability. Withdrawal sounds easy in theory, but in practice, it feels like death. Think about it. To step back is to risk being replaced. To step back is to risk being forgotten. To step back is to risk losing what little control you think you have. And yet, without stepping back, you lose something far more dangerous, yourself. So how do we apply this in real life? How do we practice stepping back without falling into games, without turning cold, without pushing people away unnecessarily? The first step is awareness. Ask yourself, where am I giving too much of myself away? Where am I too available, too predictable, too immediate? It might be in relationships. Maybe you always answer instantly. Maybe you always adjust your schedule to fit someone else's. Maybe you always over-explain yourself when you say no. It might be at work. Maybe you always pick up the tasks no one else wants. Maybe you always sacrifice your weekend to help out. Maybe you always agree to deadlines that crush your own well-being. Or it might be in your family. Maybe you always play peacemaker. Maybe you always smooth over the conflict. Maybe you always carry the emotional weight that others drop. Wherever it is, the first step is to see it. To see how your constant availability has created invisibility. And then comes the second step. Experiment with absence. Not total disappearance. Not ghosting or cutting people out without explanation. That's just avoidance. But small, deliberate acts of stepping back. Don't respond instantly. Don't volunteer immediately. Don't fill every silence. Don't rescue every mistake. Let the gap open. Let others feel it. It will feel terrifying at first. But watch what happens. That colleague who always relied on you finds another way to solve the problem. That partner who expected you to carry the emotional load suddenly realizes they must step up. That friend who took you for granted starts checking in, sensing the distance. This is not magic. This is psychology. Because human beings respond not only to presence, but to contrast. We only value what we can lose, and we only notice what is missing when it actually goes missing. But here's where the pitfalls creep in. Withdrawal can easily become manipulation if you're not careful. It can turn into silent treatment. It can turn into cold games designed to make others chase you. It can turn into passive aggression. And when that happens, it stops being individuation and becomes another mask. The difference is intent. If you step back because you're afraid of confrontation, that's avoidance. If you step back to punish someone, that's control. But if you step back to reclaim your time, to recenter your worth, to protect your energy, that is individuation. That is healthy withdrawal. And yet, even here, doubts creep in. What if people forget about me? What if they stop calling, stop asking, stop caring? What if my absence proves I was never valuable in the first place? This is the hidden fear. The fear that silence will expose the truth. But here's the uncomfortable reality. If your withdrawal reveals someone doesn't truly care, that was the truth all along. Your constant availability was only hiding it. And if your withdrawal makes them realize your value, that was the truth all along. They simply needed the absence to wake up to it. Either way, you win. Because either way, you stop living in illusion. Now let's turn to a practical framework. Imagine 3 zones of presence. The first zone is over-availability. This is when you're always there, always responding, always bending. People stop seeing you. You become part of the furniture. The second zone is healthy withdrawal. This is where you give, but not endlessly. You show up, but you also step back. Your presence has rhythm like music. You balance availability with distance. The third zone is isolation. This is when withdrawal goes too far. You cut people off completely. You hide, avoid, and detach so deeply that no one can reach you. The art is to live in the second zone. Not constant availability, not total absence, but deliberate rhythm, like breathing. Inhale, exhale, show up, step back. But here's the next trap. When people first feel your withdrawal, they might resist. They might accuse you of being selfish. They might try to guilt you. They might even push harder, testing your boundaries. And this is the test. Because every time you change a pattern, those who benefited from the old one will resist. If you were always available, your withdrawal threatens their comfort. Of course they'll resist. But that resistance is proof you're finally shifting the dynamic. Think of it this way. If no one pushes back when you change, it probably means you haven't changed much at all. So how do you handle the guilt? Because guilt will be the shadow that follows you as you step back. The answer is this: reframe guilt as growth. When guilt arises, ask yourself, is this guilt because I'm doing wrong or because I'm breaking an old pattern? Most of the time, guilt is simply the ghost of your former self trying to pull you back into over-availability. And guilt, when examined, becomes a compass. It points directly to the areas where you need to step back the most. Let's make this even more concrete. Picture a woman named Sarah. She's the dependable friend, the one who always listens, always helps, always answers. Her phone buzzes late at night, she picks it up. Her friends need advice, she's there. Her coworkers need extra help, she gives it. At first, she feels proud. She thinks, I'm a good person. I'm needed. I'm valuable. But slowly, she notices something. Her friends don't thank her anymore. Her coworkers expect her help as if it's owed. Her own needs are invisible. One day, exhausted, she decides to experiment. When a message arrives late at night, she doesn't respond. When a coworker tries to hand her extra work, she politely declines. When a friend rants without asking how she's doing, she changes the subject. At first, people react. They accuse her of being distant. They guilt her for changing. They even try to test her boundaries. But then something shifts. Some friends step up and ask how she's doing for the first time. Some coworkers respect her time more, and others, who only valued her endless giving, fade away. Her withdrawal reveals the truth, and her truth sets her free. This is the power of stepping back. It clarifies who values you for you, and who only valued what you could give. But the question remains, how do you practice this consistently without falling into extremes? Here's a method. Call it the pause principle. Whenever someone asks for your time, energy, or attention, don't answer immediately. Pause. Even a short pause changes the pattern. It gives you space to ask, do I really want to give here? Do I have the energy? Is this request respecting my boundaries? If the answer is no, you decline with calm, not guilt. If the answer is yes, you give but from choice, not compulsion. That pause is your step back. And from that step back, your presence gains power. But here's the paradox we must embrace. Sometimes when you step back, no one steps forward. Sometimes you withdraw and realize that the relationship, the friendship, the job only survived because you kept feeding it. And without your constant fuel, it collapses. That collapse is painful, but it's also revelation. Because if something dies when you stop overgiving, it wasn't real connection. It was dependency. Jung would call this a confrontation with the shadow of your relationships, the shadow of your patterns, the shadow of yourself. And facing it is the only way to move from illusion to truth. So ask yourself, where are you afraid to step back? Because you know the truth will be exposed. That friendship that only survives when you chase it. That partner who only stays close when you overgive. That workplace that only values you when you sacrifice. These are the mirrors that show you the cost of your availability. And the only way to see clearly is to step back. Because in that space, truth is revealed. And in that truth, freedom begins. Some of you listening right now might be asking yourself, but what if stepping back makes me lose everything? What if people stop caring? What if the world simply moves on without me? That is the fear at the core of all of this. The fear of vanishing. The fear that without constant effort, you will disappear from the lives of others. But here's the paradox. The more you cling, the faster people drift. The more you overgive, the less they notice. And the more you try to hold everything together, the more invisible you become. Stepping back does not erase you, it reveals you. Think of the night sky. We don't notice the stars at noon. They're there, shining with the same light, but the sun's constant presence drowns them out. Only when the sky goes dark do we finally see the stars. Your withdrawal is that darkness. It allows your light to be seen. But let's play with the doubts. What if I step back and no one notices? Then you've learned the truth about where you stood. And truth, however painful, is always better than illusion. What if they get angry at my withdrawal? Then you've revealed the hidden contract that they expected endless giving without balance. And contracts exposed can finally be renegotiated. What if I feel too guilty to hold the line? Then you've discovered your edge. And growth only happens at the edge. Now let's shift into something deeper. Jung believed that individuation required separation. Not permanent isolation, but moments of retreat, times when you stop playing the role others need and face who you really are. He withdrew into his inner world to meet his own shadows. And from that withdrawal, his greatest contributions emerged. This principle applies to all of us. When you step back, you don't just create space for others. You create space for yourself. Ask yourself honestly, how much of your life right now is a performance? How many times have you said yes when every bone in your body screamed no? How many times have you smiled when you wanted to fall silent? How many times have you shown up just so you wouldn't be forgotten? And now the harder question. What would your life look like if you stopped performing? If you stepped back, not just from people, but from the version of yourself that keeps trying to be enough? Silence. That's what you'd face first. And silence is terrifying, because silence holds up the mirror. But silence is also where you meet yourself. Silence is where you rediscover your own rhythm. Silence is where you realize that the world will not collapse if you stop holding it up. This is why withdrawal is not selfish. It's sacred. It's not abandonment. It's alignment. When you step back, others may step forward, or they may not. But either way, you step into yourself. Now let's consider some examples. A father who always tries to fix every problem for his children. He thinks he's helping, but in reality, he's stealing their chance to grow. When he steps back, his children stumble. They struggle. But slowly, they learn to stand. A woman in a relationship who gives everything. Her partner takes it all without noticing. She finally withdraws. At first, there is conflict, accusations, resistance. But then her partner faces the emptiness and learns to show up too. Or maybe he doesn't. And in that case, her withdrawal becomes revelation. She learns that love without reciprocity is not love, it's dependence. Even in history, this principle repeats itself. Leaders who withdraw from the public eye often return with more respect than before. Thinkers who vanish into solitude bring back insights that reshape the world. Artists who disappear for years return with works that shake culture. Absence is not weakness. It is part of the cycle of power. But let's come back to you. Right now, listening to these words, where are you overgiving? Where are you terrified to withdraw? What patterns would collapse if you stopped holding them together? And the final, most important question, what version of you is waiting to emerge the moment you step back? Because this is the truth Jung leaves us with. Individuation is not about becoming what others need. It's about becoming what you already are, but have been too busy, too noisy, too entangled to notice. When you step back, you don't just change how others behave. You change the ground beneath your own feet. You realize you don't have to chase respect. You don't have to beg for love. You don't have to scream for recognition. You only need to step back far enough to see that your worth was never in question. And then, something shifts. People who truly value you step forward. They meet you halfway. They carry the weight they should have been carrying all along. And those who don't, they fade. Not because you lost them, but because they were never truly there. So here's the conclusion, simple but not easy. If you want to be valued, learn to withdraw. If you want to be respected, learn to pause. If you want to be seen, learn to disappear. Because only in stepping back do you finally move forward. And only in absence do you discover the true weight of your presence. So take this with you. You don't need to be everywhere to be remembered. You don't need to be everything to be loved. You don't need to be always available to matter. Step back. Let silence do its work. And watch as the people who truly belong in your life step forward.